Once all the black is selected, go to the Filter tab and under Texture, you can select Texturizer. The Scale tab determines how large the texture is, and the Relief tab is similar to the amount of posterization of the image. Typically, you would choose the highest amount. This method will give the image a more uniform, distressed look, which is often what you want, depending on the type of print you were doing. When printing retro or distressed shirts, it's always a good idea to reduce the ink. Often people think you can only do this type of print using water-based inks to get the true feel of an aged shirt. But if you use a reducer and reduce your plastisol ink, not only will the print look aged, but it will also feel smooth like an aged shirt without having to worry about printing with high-stress, quick-drying water-based inks. This white ink is being reduced to about 60-40. By comparing the two, you can see the straight white ink is much thicker than the now reduced white ink. This is what allows the ink to pass well onto the shirt and have a nice soft hand for that true retro feel. We'll repeat the process with the Magenta ink. Keep in mind that you only want to mix as much as you're going to use, and if it's not the right consistency, you can always add more reducer. The more you reduce the ink, the more it will bleed into the shirt, and the less opaque it will look. Experiment to determine the right mixture for your print and what look you're going for. Once your ink is mixed, follow your standard methods of printing. When finished, you will have a nice looking retro shirt with a soft hand, all without having to deal with the hassle of using water-based inks. Let's employ similar methods to ready a photograph for a retro-style print, whether you have a RIP software or not. First, go to the Image tab, and then Adjustments, and then select the Threshold tool as we've shown you before. Using the Threshold tool, you can adjust the image to the look you want. This will give it the distressed look without having to make any complicated adjustments. Using the methods we taught earlier, using the brush or eraser tool, and then posterizing the image with the Threshold tool to get the look you want. Another method for getting this look is to use the Posterized tool from under the Image tab. However, before you can use the Posterized tool, you must desaturate the image. Once you've done that, you can use the Posterized tool. Selecting the lower number will give you the most distressed look. The problem with the Posterized tool is that it doesn't give you the amount of control and flexibility the Threshold tool will give you. Here's the photo printed out. Just as a point of reference, we'll first look at a photo that has been printed using halftone and the RIP software. You can see all the fine detail the print is able to pick up if you're using a halftone printer. Next is the same photo after it's been posterized and printed using a straight whole-tone printer. A side-by-side comparison shows you a clear-cut difference in the detail of the prints. All you need to print halftone images, including halftone prints and RIP software, is available through silkscreening.supplies.com. Wraparound, or all-over printing, consists of any type of printing that is not constrained to one side of the shirt, as you can see here. This design starts on the chest and continues over the shoulder and onto the back. Let's start with the proper Photoshop techniques to be able to print such a complicated design. As you can see, the artwork begins with the crest and continues up the shirt, over the shoulder, and onto the back. The first thing to realize with a design like this is that the artwork orientation and direction must change as it progresses across the shirt. Using scribe marks and the ruler tool in Photoshop, you can determine at what point you want the artwork to flip direction. In this design, that would be at the top of the shoulder. This design will be printed and exposed onto two different screens, and the center lines overlying the design tell us where to separate the design into two designs. Keep in mind that there are different size shirts, so you need to incorporate about a 3-inch gap to compensate for the different size shirts. Once your artwork is done, you can use the crop tool to crop the design and make two separate images to expose on your screens. Remember to overlap where you crop each design for printing later. To ensure accuracy and not waste film, you can print out your art on paper using the draft mode to save ink, and then place the mock-up on the sizes you'll be printing. Once the screens are on the press, you'll see how to use tape on the screen to print the design as needed. Here, we see the design separated for printing. We will be printing this design with one color. But don't let the complexity of this type of printing intimidate you. Using your normal techniques for multiple color printing, you can just as easily print multiple colors with this type of printing. Let's go to the press and see this in action. We're going to print this design twice, once with just a standard method of printing, and then a second time using a specialized technique, allowing the seam of the shirt to be recessed on the press to print over it using a custom-made palette. The small palette is for the front of the shirt, and the large palette will be for the back of the shirt. Depending on the style of print you are making, you may need to have a custom palette designed for your press. Once the palettes are lined up properly with your screen, you'll be ready to place your shirt on the palette. You'll need to adjust the screen so it lines up properly with the left side of the shirt. As always, apply your spray adhesive and place the shirt on the palette. Marking on the palette where the shirt lines up is always a good idea to get consistent prints throughout production. Also important with this type of printing is to tape off your screen where the shirt stops, so there is no overflow of ink coming through the exposed screen. Apply your ink and print. As you can see, the print stops right on the seam. Repeat this process with the back of your shirt using the rest of your design. Tape. Apply ink. Print. And cure. Here's the finished print, wrapping nicely over the shoulder and onto the back. But as you can see, there's a gap at the seam. Let's look at how to print over that seam. One method is to use some curable reducer with your ink, which will allow the ink to print over that seam more effectively. Another method is to use a piece of cardboard to compensate for the seam by raising the level of the shirt so the seam will be on the same level plane as the rest of the shirt.